A whispered call for help. The hum of the streetlight outside cast a soft glow through the cracked blinds of a small, cluttered room, where 13-year-old Elijah sat on his bed, his fingers anxiously tapping the frayed edges of his worn blanket. He could hear the sounds of his father's heavy footsteps outside his door, each step punctuated by muttered curses and the faint clinking of glass bottles. Elijah's heart raced as he clutched his mother's cell phone, the weight of his decision pressing down on him like an anchor. Tonight felt different. The tension in the house was palpable, like a storm brewing on a quiet sea. It was late, and he knew his father would soon stumble into his room, fueled by anger and intoxication. Elijah's mother, Sarah, had quietly begged him to stay hidden in his room tonight, her eyes pleading in a way that he could not ignore. But as he listened to her muffled cries from the other room, he realized he couldn't stay silent any longer. Taking a deep, shaky breath, he dialed 911, his hands trembling as he pressed the phone to his ear. 911. What's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, professional, and steady, a lifeline in the chaos surrounding him. Please help us, Elijah whispered, his voice barely audible. My dad. He's hurting my mom. He's out of control. The operator's tone softened. What's your address, sweetheart? Help is on the way. But I need you to stay calm, okay? Elijah swallowed, struggling to keep his voice from breaking as he whispered, 1245 Pine Avenue. As he heard the distant sound of glass shattering and his mother's stifled sobs, he pressed himself deeper into the shadows, hoping to remain unseen. He could make out his father's voice, slurred and full of rage, as he stormed through the house. Where's that little rat? His father roared. Elijah, get out here. The operator's voice remained a steady anchor in his ear. Elijah, officers are on their way. Stay quiet and hidden. You're very brave, and you're doing the right thing. Elijah clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm, to not give in to the fear curling around his heart. He tried to block out the sound of his father's angry footsteps, focusing instead on the operator's voice. The minutes stretched, each one feeling like an eternity, until he finally heard the distant wail of sirens growing closer. The sound was like a breath of fresh air, a promise of safety breaking through the thick tension of the night. His father's footsteps paused, the heavy, erratic stomping replaced by a chilling silence. Elijah, his father called, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Did you call them? Did you betray me, boy? Elijah's blood turned cold, fear gripping him as he curled deeper into his hiding spot, praying his father wouldn't find him before the police arrived. Just as he thought his heart might explode from the tension, he heard the front door burst open, followed by the strong, commanding voices of police officers. Police. Freeze. Elijah remained frozen, his eyes wide with both fear and relief as he heard his father's furious protests, the sharp clang of handcuffs, and the quiet, calming voices of the officers guiding him out of the house. It's safe to come out now, Elijah, the operator said gently. You did it. You're safe. Elijah took a deep, shaky breath and slowly rose from his hiding spot. As he stepped out into the dim light of the hallway, he saw his mother sitting on the edge of the couch, her face bruised and her shoulders slumped, but her eyes filled with relief as she spotted him. Oh, my sweet boy, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling as she pulled him into her arms, holding him tightly. You were so brave. One of the female officers approached them, kneeling down to look Elijah in the eye. Her nameplate read Officer Hayes, and her gaze was soft, filled with a warmth that made him feel safe. Elijah, she said gently, what you did tonight took incredible courage. You protected yourself and your mother, and you did exactly the right thing. Elijah leaned into his mother's embrace, his small frame trembling as the adrenaline of the moment began to wear off. His mother kissed the top of his head, her hands running through his hair as she whispered words of love and gratitude. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of safety, a fragile hope blossoming in the midst of their pain. But even as the police escorted his father out of the house, a lingering worry settled in Elijah's heart. He had been strong tonight, but he knew their struggle was far from over. And though he felt a newfound determination to protect his mother, he couldn't shake the fear of what lay ahead. He was just a boy, yet he felt the weight of the world pressing down on his young shoulders, a responsibility far too heavy for someone his age. As he sat in the comforting embrace of his mother, his mind raced with questions and worries, the biggest one lingering like a shadow in the back of his mind. What would happen next? And would he ever truly be free from the fear that had haunted him for so long? This marks the beginning of Elijah's journey, a journey marked by pain, resilience, and a relentless hope for a better future. But as he would soon find, sometimes, courage alone isn't enough to overcome the darkness. Sometimes, it takes something more, a flicker of hope. 3 days had passed since that terrifying night, but for Elijah, it felt like the weight of an eternity. The world outside their small house had carried on as usual, oblivious to the life-altering shift that had taken place within its walls. For Elijah and his mother, Sarah, time had stilled, leaving them to sift through the remnants of their fractured lives. The bruises on Sarah's face were beginning to fade, but Elijah noticed the way she flinched at sudden noises, her gaze distant and weary. Today, Elijah found himself in a place he never expected to be, a courthouse. The polished wood of the benches, the high ceilings, and the echo of shuffling papers and murmured voices all added to the surrealness of the experience. Elijah sat beside his mother, his small hand tightly gripping hers. He could feel her hand tremble slightly in his, but her grip was strong, a silent message of solidarity. Though she wore her best dress and had tried to cover the bruises, the stress and pain she'd endured were etched into her face, visible to anyone who looked closely. They had been assigned a victim advocate named Mrs. Jenkins, a kind woman with warm eyes who sat beside them, offering occasional words of encouragement. Elijah was grateful for her presence, even if he didn't fully understand her role. Mrs. Jenkins had explained that she was there to help them through the court process and to ensure they felt supported, but to Elijah, she was simply a comforting presence in a sea of unfamiliar faces and intimidating procedures. Across the room sat his father, Tyler, in a prison-issued orange jumpsuit. The defiant, angry man who had once filled their home with fear now looked small and subdued, his shoulders hunched, his gaze fixed on the floor. Beside him was a court-appointed lawyer who seemed more interested in the notes in front of him than the man he was supposed to be defending. Tyler barely looked at Elijah, but when he did, his expression was a mix of anger and disbelief. Elijah felt a knot of anxiety twist in his stomach, but he took a deep breath and straightened his shoulders, reminding himself of Officer Hayes' words. He was brave. He had done the right thing. When the judge entered the courtroom, a hush fell over the room. Judge Patricia Warren was an older woman with silver-rimmed glasses perched on the bridge of her nose, her presence commanding yet compassionate. Her gaze softened as she glanced toward Elijah and Sarah, though her tone was firm and unyielding when she turned her attention to Tyler. In the case of the state versus Tyler Evans, she began, her voice echoing through the courtroom. This court has reviewed the evidence presented, including the testimony of Mrs. Sarah Evans and the 911 call placed by her son, Elijah Evans. At the mention of his name, Elijah felt his mother's hand tighten around his. He glanced up at her, offering a small, reassuring smile. He knew she was proud of him, but he could see the worry in her eyes, the fear that had lingered ever since that night. Judge Patricia's gaze was steady as she addressed Tyler directly. Mr. Evans, your actions have caused significant physical and emotional harm to your family. The evidence presented shows a clear pattern of domestic abuse, and the court cannot overlook the impact of your actions on your son, Elijah. Tyler's head dropped lower, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. Elijah noticed the subtle tremor in his father's hands, a vulnerability he had never witnessed before. Judge Patricia continued, her tone resolute. Taking into account the severity of the assault, the presence of a minor during the incidents, and your prior record, this court hereby sentences you to 5 years in state prison. Additionally, you will be required to complete both anger management and substance abuse programs during your incarceration. The sound of the judge's gavel striking her desk reverberated through the room, final and unyielding. Elijah watched as the bailiff approached his father, preparing to lead him out. Tyler's eyes darted toward Elijah, and for a brief moment their gazes met. In his father's eyes, he saw a mix of resentment, shame, and perhaps a flicker of regret. Elijah looked away, unwilling to allow his father's gaze to cast a shadow over his newfound sense of hope. As Tyler was escorted out, Elijah felt a wave of relief wash over him, the weight on his chest lifting slightly. But when he looked up at his mother, he saw tears glistening in her eyes, her expression a mixture of relief and sadness. He knew she had loved his father once, that there were memories of happier times that still lingered in her heart. For her, this wasn't just the end of a nightmare. It was also the loss of the life she had once envisioned, the family she had hoped to build. Judge Patricia rose from her seat, her gaze softening as she approached them. She knelt slightly to meet Elijah's eyes, her expression filled with warmth and admiration. "Young man," she said gently, "you showed remarkable courage. What you did was incredibly brave, and you should be very proud of yourself." Elijah nodded, feeling the surge of pride as he looked into the judge's kind eyes. He had never felt particularly strong or brave before, but today, in this moment, he felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that perhaps he could protect his mother and himself, that perhaps they could build a life free from fear. Judge Patricia then turned to Sarah, her tone compassionate. "Mrs. Evans, I want to make sure you and Elijah have the support you need moving forward. There are resources available, including counseling and assistance programs, to help you both during this transition." Sarah wiped a tear from her cheek, nodding gratefully. "Thank you, Your Honor. Your kindness means more than I can say." The judge smiled warmly. "Remember, you're not alone. There are people who care and who want to help." As the courtroom began to empty, Elijah felt a flicker of determination ignite within him. He had taken the first step in breaking free from the shadows of his past, and now he was determined to help his mother heal, to protect her in any way he could. But even as he embraced this newfound sense of purpose, a lingering worry gnawed at the back of his mind. He reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against a small, folded piece of paper. He had spent hours the night before carefully crafting a note, trying to put into words the worries and fears that had been consuming him since that night. As Judge Patricia gathered her things, preparing to leave the courtroom, Elijah took a deep breath and approached her, his heart pounding. "Excuse me, Your Honor," he said softly, his voice barely a whisper. Judge Patricia turned, her expression softening as she looked down at him. "Yes, Elijah." With trembling hands, Elijah held out the folded note. I wrote this for you." I didn't know how to say it out loud. The judge took the note, unfolding it carefully. Her eyes scanned the page, and as she read, a look of sorrow and empathy crossed her face. The note was simple, the words scrawled in Elijah's careful handwriting. "Please don't take my mom away. I know she's sick, but I don't want to be alone. I don't know what I'll do if she's gone." Elijah watched as Judge Patricia's eyes filled with tears. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, her voice soft and full of understanding. "Oh, Elijah," she murmured, her voice breaking slightly. "Your mother is going through a difficult time, but I want you to know that there are people who can help, people who will make sure you're never alone." Elijah felt his mother's hand on his shoulder, her touch a reassuring presence. He looked up at her, seeing the strength and love in her eyes, even through the weariness and pain. She knelt beside him, wrapping him in a protective embrace. Judge Patricia took a deep breath, her gaze firm and resolute as she looked between mother and son. "I'll speak with my team. There are programs and resources that can provide support for both of you, and I'll do everything in my power to make sure you receive the help you need." Sarah's eyes filled with gratitude as she looked at the judge. "Thank you, Your Honor. Your kindness means everything to us." The judge placed a comforting hand on Sarah's arm. "You're a strong woman, Mrs. Evans, and Elijah is a remarkable young man. Together, you'll get through this. I promise." As they left the courthouse that day, Elijah felt a sense of hope blossoming within him. The journey ahead would not be easy, and the challenges they faced were daunting, but for the first time, he felt that they were not alone. With his mother by his side, and the support of people who cared, he dared to believe that perhaps they could find a way to rebuild, to create a life free from the shadows of their past. And as he held his mother's hand, he vowed to himself that he would do everything in his power to protect her, to ensure that the nightmares of the past would never haunt them again. The unseen burden. The days after the court hearing felt like a new beginning for Elijah and his mother, Sarah, but with each small step forward, the weight of unspoken worries grew heavier. Tyler was gone, sentenced to years in prison, and their house was finally free from his wrathful presence. Yet as Elijah lay in bed each night, the comfort of this new reality was overshadowed by his mother's frail, quiet figure. Since Tyler's departure, Elijah had noticed the exhaustion that clung to his mother, as if her strength was slowly fading. She moved through the house with a gentle persistence, folding clothes, making meals, and doing her best to shield Elijah from the truth he had already sensed. Her laughter, once rare but bright, had turned softer, and her eyes held a weariness that went beyond the bruises she was still healing from. Elijah's concerns grew steadily until one evening he could no longer ignore them. It was a cold, crisp autumn night, the kind that wrapped the world in a silent, peaceful chill. Elijah found his mother sitting in her favorite chair by the window, her gaze distant as she looked out into the darkness. The soft glow of the street lamp outside cast shadows across her face, highlighting the lines of worry and pain etched into her expression. "Mom," he said gently, taking a step toward her. "Are you okay?" Sarah's eyes snapped back into focus, and she offered him a tired smile. "Of course, sweetheart. Just thinking." But Elijah knew his mother too well to accept her simple answer. She had been giving him that same response for days now, deflecting his questions with a smile that no longer reached her eyes. "Mom," he pressed, his voice small but determined. "I know you're not okay. I heard you talking to the doctor that day at the clinic." Sarah's expression softened, a flicker of sadness crossing her face as she looked at him. "You don't have to worry about that, Elijah. I'm doing everything I can to make sure we're okay." Elijah's chest tightened as he took her hand in his. Her skin felt cold, fragile, as if she might break under the weight of his touch. "But Mom, you're sick. You need treatment. And I don't want to lose you." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she looked at her son, her brave, determined boy who had faced more hardship than most children his age could imagine. She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead, her hand trembling. "Elijah," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I know you're scared. I am too. But we have to have faith. We'll figure this out together." Elijah's eyes filled with tears, his heart aching as he looked at his mother. He wished he could be stronger, that he could take away the pain and fear she carried. But he was just a boy, and the weight of their circumstances felt too heavy to bear. "Maybe we could get help," he suggested, his voice wavering. "The judge said there were programs and people who could help us." Sarah's gaze drifted toward the window once more, her expression thoughtful. She had always been proud, fiercely independent even in the face of hardship. But now, as she looked at her son, she realized that accepting help might be the only way to give him the future he deserved. The next morning, they'd visited the courthouse. Mrs. Jenkins, the victim advocate who had stood by their side during the trial, welcomed them with a warm smile and led them to a small, comfortable office filled with brochures and forms. She explained the resources available to them, from financial assistance to medical support, and as Sarah listened, a spark of hope began to grow within her. There were programs to help with her treatment costs, assistance with daily living expenses, and, perhaps most importantly, counseling services for both her and Elijah. The thought of sharing their burdens with others was daunting, but Sarah knew that this might be their only chance to rebuild their lives. Mrs. Jenkins handed Sarah a folder filled with information, her gaze kind and reassuring. "You're not alone, Sarah. There are people who care and who want to help you both through this." Sarah clutched the folder to her chest, her heart heavy with gratitude. She thanked Mrs. Jenkins, and as they left the courthouse, Elijah noticed a lightness in his mother's step, a small but significant shift in her demeanor. Later that evening, as they sat together at the kitchen table, Sarah opened the folder, spreading the papers out before them. She pointed to a section titled "Financial Aid for Medical Treatment," her voice hopeful. "We can apply for assistance to cover the treatment costs," she explained to Elijah, her tone filled with a quiet determination. "This means I can start the treatment I need, and it means I'll be here for you." Elijah's heart soared at her words, his worry easing slightly as he looked at the documents. They spent hours filling out forms, listing expenses, and detailing their financial situation. For the first time in months, they had a plan, a sense of purpose that gave them the strength to keep moving forward. In the weeks that followed, the financial assistance came through, along with a monthly stipend to help cover their basic needs. It wasn't much, but it was enough to lift some of the burden that had weighed them down for so long. Sarah started her treatments, and though they left her weak and exhausted, she clung to the hope that they would give her more time with Elijah. As her treatment continued, a court-appointed caretaker named Denise began visiting 3 days a week to help with household chores and errands. Denise was a kind, middle-aged woman with a warm smile and a gentle manner. She treated Sarah and Elijah with respect and compassion, going above and beyond her duties to make their lives a little easier. Denise would often bring fresh vegetables from her garden or baked goods she had made, her presence a comforting balm to their weary souls. Elijah quickly grew fond of her, and he found himself looking forward to her visits, her kindness a stark contrast to the turmoil that had filled their lives for so long. Despite the challenges, Elijah threw himself into his studies, finding solace in the quiet hours he spent hunched over his textbooks, determined to make something of himself. His teachers noticed his dedication, and his grades began to climb, particularly in math and science. His mother's praise and Denise's encouragement only fueled his resolve. One evening, as he finished his homework, Elijah looked over at his mother, who was resting on the couch, her face pale but peaceful. The weariness in her expression had softened, replaced by a quiet strength that he admired deeply. "Mom," he said softly, crossing the room to sit beside her, "I'm going to work hard. I'm going to do my best in school so I can take care of us. I promise." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her son, pride shining through the exhaustion. She reached out, taking his hand in hers, her voice filled with love. "I know you will, Elijah. You're my brave boy, and I'm so proud of you." They sat together in the quiet of their living room, the weight of the past still lingering but no longer suffocating. For the first time in a long time they had hope, a fragile, delicate hope, but hope nonetheless. As the days turned into weeks, they settled into a new routine. Denise's visits provided Sarah with the support she needed to focus on her treatment, and Elijah's studies flourished. The kindness of others, from the court assistants to Denise's unwavering support, had created a foundation upon which they could begin to rebuild their lives. But even as they found comfort in their newfound stability, Elijah couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. He knew there would be challenges ahead, obstacles that would test their resilience and courage. Yet, as he looked at his mother, he felt a strength within him, a determination to face whatever lay ahead with the same bravery that had carried them through the darkest of nights. They had survived the storm, but Elijah knew there was still a long road ahead. And though the path was uncertain, he was no longer afraid. He had his mother, and together they would face the future with unwavering hope and the strength of their bond. Shadows of resilience. Weeks had passed since Sarah had begun her treatment, and although each day brought new challenges, she and Elijah had begun to settle into a life that felt almost normal. The pain that had once haunted their home had been replaced by moments of warmth and peace, though every new sunrise was tempered by the realities they continued to face. Sarah had always been a proud woman, and the effects of her illness weighed on her in ways Elijah could only guess. She was no longer the vibrant, lively mother she had been in his earliest memories. Each round of treatment left her weak, and the simple tasks she once managed with ease now required the support of her caretaker, Denise, or sometimes even Elijah himself. The change had affected them both, pulling them closer together in ways they had never imagined, but also deepening Elijah's sense of responsibility. At 13, Elijah understood more about struggle and sacrifice than most kids his age. He shouldered the weight of their circumstances with a maturity beyond his years, driven by a fierce love for his mother and an unbreakable determination to keep her safe. Every day, he woke up early to prepare a simple breakfast for her before heading off to school, and every evening, he helped her organize her medications, his small hand steady as he counted out the pills. One evening, Elijah sat at the kitchen table, hunched over his homework, while his mother rested on the couch. Denise had gone home for the night, leaving the house in a comfortable quiet. Sarah's breaths were shallow, her chest rising and falling with a gentle rhythm, and Elijah found himself glancing over at her every few minutes, reassured by the sight of her peaceful face. Suddenly, Sarah stirred, her eyes fluttering open as she glanced around disoriented. When she saw Elijah, a soft smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "Elijah," she whispered, her voice faint but warm. "Come sit with me." He immediately abandoned his homework, crossing the room to sit beside her. She reached for his hand, her fingers thin and delicate as she squeezed his gently. "Mom," he murmured, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you okay?" She nodded, though the effort of even that small movement seemed to sap her strength. "I am, sweetheart. I'm tired, but I want you to know how proud I am of you." Elijah's throat tightened as he looked into her eyes, the depth of her love and pride reflected in her gaze. He tried to smile, but the ache in his chest made it difficult. "You don't have to worry about me, Mom," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm going to take care of you, I promise." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead. "I know you will. But Elijah, you shouldn't have to carry this burden alone. You deserve to be a kid, to live a life free from worry." Elijah shook his head, his heart aching as he looked at her. "I don't mind, Mom. You're more important to me than anything else." The room fell silent as they sat together, mother and son united by an unspoken bond of love and resilience. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, the sound a soft whisper against the walls of their small home. It was moments like these that reminded Elijah of all they had endured, of the strength they had found in each other amidst the chaos and pain. As the days continued, Sarah's condition remained fragile, but with Denise's help, they maintained a semblance of stability. Denise was more than a caretaker. She had become a friend, a quiet force of strength who helped ease the weight of their daily struggles. Her presence was a balm to their wounds, her kindness a reminder that they were not alone. But even as life settled into a routine, Elijah could feel the tension growing within him. He was doing well in school, his teachers praising his dedication and resilience, but he found it increasingly difficult to focus. Each day, he worried about his mother, his mind drifting from math equations and history lessons to thoughts of her frail figure, her wan smile. He couldn't shake the fear that one day he might come home to find her gone, leaving him alone in a world that felt too vast and unforgiving. One afternoon, after a particularly long day at school, Elijah made his way home, his footsteps slow as he walked down the familiar streets of their neighborhood. The leaves were beginning to change, the trees a brilliant display of reds and golds, but Elijah barely noticed the beauty around him. His thoughts were heavy, his mind consumed by the uncertainty of their future. When he reached their front door, he found Denise waiting on the porch, her expression unreadable. She offered him a gentle smile as he approached, though he could sense a hint of sadness in her gaze. "Hey, Elijah," she said softly, reaching out to place a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Your mom's resting right now. She had a rough day, but she wanted me to tell you she loves you, and that she'll see you when she wakes up." Elijah nodded, the familiar ache in his chest flaring as he looked at Denise. Is she going to be okay?" Denise's smile faltered, and she knelt down to meet his gaze, her eyes filled with compassion. "Your mom is a fighter, Elijah. She's been through so much, and she's holding on because of you. She loves you more than anything, and she's doing everything she can to stay strong." Elijah swallowed, his eyes stinging with unshed tears. But what if it's not enough? Denise's hand tightened on his shoulder, her expression gentle yet firm. "Then we'll be here for you, Elijah. You have people who care about you, who want to help. You're not alone in this." Elijah nodded, though the weight of his fear remained, a constant shadow that loomed over him. He thanked Denise and made his way inside, heading to his room, where he could finally let his emotions spill out. He sank onto his bed, his shoulders shaking as he released the tears he had been holding back, the overwhelming fear and grief pouring out in waves. He cried for his mother, for the life they had lost, and for the uncertainty of what lay ahead. But as the tears subsided, a new determination began to grow within him, a fierce resolve to protect his mother, to hold their family together no matter the cost. In the weeks that followed, Elijah channeled his pain into action. He threw himself into his studies, working late into the night to maintain his grades. His teachers noticed the change, their expressions a mix of admiration and concern, as they watched him tackle every assignment with a relentless determination. But even as he excelled academically, Elijah's worry for his mother only grew. She had started hiding her pain from him, putting on a brave face whenever he was around, but he could see through her mask. He noticed the way her hands trembled when she thought he wasn't looking, the way she struggled to catch her breath after even the simplest tasks. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Elijah finally decided to confront her. "Mom," he said, his voice steady but filled with concern. "You don't have to pretend with me. I know you're in pain." Sarah looked at him, her eyes softening as she reached out to take his hand. "Oh, Elijah, I don't want you to worry. You've been through so much already." Elijah shook his head, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not a little kid anymore, Mom. I can handle it, and I want to help." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her son, the depth of his love and resilience touching her heart in ways she could not put into words. She pulled him into a gentle hug, her voice a whisper as she held him close. "You've always been my brave boy, Elijah. I don't know what I'd do without you." They sat together in the quiet of their home, mother and son united by a bond that could not be broken. The future remained uncertain, but in that moment they found solace in each other's embrace, a reminder that they were not alone in their struggle. As the days continued, Elijah and Sarah leaned on each other, finding strength in their love and determination to survive. Denise's visits provided a lifeline, her presence a steady source of support that allowed them to face each new challenge with courage and resilience. Together, they navigated the shadows of their past, holding on to the hope that brighter days lay ahead. And though the road was long and filled with obstacles, Elijah knew that as long as he had his mother by his side, he could face anything the world threw at him. Their journey was far from over, but they had each other. And in that, they found the strength to carry on. The price of strength. The morning dawned gray and quiet, a muted light filtering through the thin curtains in Elijah's bedroom. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind heavy with thoughts he couldn't escape. Every day felt like a race against time, a desperate attempt to shield his mother from pain, while trying to hold on to the fragile normalcy they had built together. Over the weeks, Sarah's health had continued to wane. Her treatments, though vital, took a brutal toll on her body, leaving her weaker with each passing day. Elijah could see it in the way she moved, slower, more deliberate, as if each step required careful consideration. She tried to hide it from him, tried to put on a brave face, but he saw through her attempts. He always had. Today was a day he had been dreading. Sarah had an important doctor's appointment, one that would determine whether the treatments were working or if they would need to consider other, more invasive options. Elijah had pleaded to go with her, but she insisted he stay at school, reassuring him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Don't worry, Elijah," she had said, her voice steady but soft. "It's just a routine checkup. You focus on school, okay? I'll be fine." But Elijah couldn't focus. Throughout the day, he found himself lost in thought, his mind drifting from his classes to thoughts of his mother sitting in the cold, sterile exam room, her hands clenched tightly in her lap as she waited for news that would change both their lives. Every time his teacher called his name, he forced himself to snap back to attention, but the worry gnawed at him, relentless and unyielding. When the final bell rang, Elijah rushed home, his heart pounding as he unlocked the front door. He half expected to see his mother waiting for him, her warm smile greeting him as she always did, but the house was empty, eerily silent. Denise had likely taken her to the appointment, as planned, but the quietness unsettled him, a stark reminder of how much his life had changed. He threw his backpack onto the couch and paced the small living room, glancing at the clock every few minutes. As the minutes ticked by, his anxiety grew, his thoughts spiraling with worry. What if the news was bad? What if they had to move forward with more aggressive treatments? Treatments they couldn't afford. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he heard the soft creak of the front door. He rushed toward it, his heart pounding as his mother stepped inside, her face pale, her expression unreadable. Denise followed behind her, her eyes kind but somber as she met Elijah's worried gaze. "Elijah," Sarah said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She offered him a small smile, though he could see the exhaustion etched into her features. "The doctor, well, he gave us some news." Denise placed a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder, her voice gentle as she spoke. "Your mom is going to need a different type of treatment, Elijah. It's a bit more intensive, but the doctors are hopeful that it will improve her condition." Elijah's heart sank as he looked between his mother and Denise, his mind racing with questions he was too afraid to ask. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself as he spoke. What does that mean?" Sarah sat down on the couch, patting the spot beside her. Elijah joined her, his hands clenched tightly in his lap as he waited for her to continue. "It means," she began, her voice shaky, "that the treatments I've been getting aren't enough. The cancer it's spreading, but slowly. The doctors think that if we start a new treatment, one that's stronger, we might have a better chance at fighting it." Elijah swallowed, his chest tightening as he listened. "But is it going to work?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him, her gaze filled with both love and sorrow. "We don't know, Elijah, but we have to try. I want to be here for you. I want to see you grow up, to see all the amazing things I know you're going to do. This treatment might give us more time, and that's worth fighting for." Elijah's throat tightened, and he looked away, blinking back tears. He didn't want his mother to see him cry, didn't want her to know how scared he was. He was supposed to be strong for her, to protect her from the fear that weighed so heavily on his heart. Denise spoke up, her tone gentle. "The doctors are going to need to see your mom more often, and the treatments will make her weaker for a while. That means she's going to need you more than ever, Elijah. But we're all here for you. We'll get through this together." Elijah nodded, though the weight of her words pressed down on him, suffocating. He had always been prepared to help his mother, to support her in any way he could, but the reality of their situation was a burden he wasn't sure he could carry alone. Over the next few weeks, their lives settled into a new grueling routine. Sarah's appointments became more frequent, her strength waning as the treatments took their toll. She spent most of her days resting, her once bright eyes dull with exhaustion. Denise was there almost every day, helping with meals, cleaning, and offering gentle encouragement to both mother and son. But despite the support, Elijah felt a growing sense of isolation. At school, he felt disconnected from his classmates, their carefree laughter and chatter a painful reminder of the life he had once known. While they planned for sports games and weekend outings, Elijah spent his evenings watching over his mother, his thoughts consumed by the fear of losing her. One afternoon, after a particularly exhausting day, Elijah sat beside his mother as she rested on the couch, her hand weakly grasping his. "Elijah," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I need you to promise me something." He looked at her, his heart aching as he saw the pain etched into her face. "Anything, Mom." She took a deep breath, her gaze steady as she looked at him. "I need you to promise me that no matter what happens, you'll keep going. You'll keep fighting, even if I'm not here to help you." Elijah's chest tightened, and he shook his head, unwilling to entertain the thought. "Don't say that, Mom. You're going to get better. The treatment is going to work." Sarah's eyes softened, and she reached up to gently cup his cheek. "I hope so, sweetheart. But we have to be realistic. I want you to be strong, to live your life fully. Promise me that you'll do that, no matter what." Elijah blinked back tears, his heart breaking as he looked at her. "I promise, Mom," he whispered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll try my best." They sat together in silence, the weight of their shared promise hanging between them. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the heater and the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. But even in the stillness, Elijah felt a fierce determination growing within him, a resolve to keep his promise, to carry on his mother's legacy, no matter what challenges lay ahead. As the weeks turned into months, the toll of Sarah's treatments became more apparent. Her once strong frame grew frail, her movements slower and more labored. She slept more, her days marked by a constant battle against the pain that had become a permanent part of her existence. Elijah continued to care for her, his heart aching with each passing day as he watched her strength fade. But even in her weakest moments, Sarah never wavered in her love for him. She would smile, reaching out to hold his hand, her gaze filled with a love so fierce it seemed to transcend the boundaries of life and death. One evening, as they sat together in the dim light of their living room, Sarah looked at Elijah, her eyes filled with a quiet resolve. "Elijah," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, "I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'll always be with you. You're my greatest joy, my reason for everything. I'm so proud of you." Elijah's chest tightened, and he looked away, unable to bear the weight of her words. But he felt her hand on his cheek, guiding his gaze back to hers. "You're going to be okay," she continued, her voice filled with a fierce determination. "You're strong, Elijah, stronger than you know, and I know you're going to do amazing things." They sat together, mother and son, united by a bond that could not be broken, even by the cruel hands of fate. Elijah held his mother's hand, his heart heavy with both love and sorrow, and in that moment, he knew that he would carry her strength with him for the rest of his life. As the night deepened and the room grew quiet, Elijah whispered a silent promise to himself. He would be strong, just as she had asked. He would carry her love with him, a light in the darkness, a reminder that he was never truly alone. No matter what lay ahead, he would face it with the strength and resilience his mother had given him. And though his heart ached with the weight of his loss, he knew that her love would guide him, a beacon of hope in a world that felt both vast and unfamiliar. For now, he would hold her hand, cherishing each moment, each breath, and when the time came, he would honor her memory, carrying her spirit with him as he carved his own path in a world that she had prepared him to face with courage and grace. Carrying the flame. The day dawned bright and clear, yet Elijah awoke feeling as if a storm was raging within him. He glanced at the empty spot where his mother should have been and felt a hollowness that ran deeper than anything he had ever experienced. Sarah's health had taken a swift and heartbreaking turn in the final days, and despite his quiet, desperate prayers, Elijah's greatest fear had come to pass. His mother was gone, her battle finally over. The house felt different now, emptier, quieter, as if it were holding its breath in reverence. Every corner was filled with memories of her, the worn armchair by the window, where she would sit wrapped in a blanket on cold mornings, the faint scent of lavender from the soap she used, the kitchen, where they had shared countless meals and whispered conversations. Elijah moved through the rooms, his footsteps echoing in the silence, each step a reminder of what he had lost. He knew he couldn't stay home forever, that he would have to return to school and face the world. But for now, he wanted to hold on to every memory, every lingering trace of her presence, as if by doing so, he could keep her with him a little longer. Denise arrived later that morning, her face drawn and solemn as she hugged Elijah, offering quiet words of comfort. She had become a part of their family in those final months, her unwavering support a constant presence in their lives. She spent the day helping Elijah sort through his mother's things, each item a piece of the life they had shared, a life that was now slipping through his fingers. They found themselves in Sarah's small bedroom, sorting through her belongings with care and reverence. Denise held up a small, faded photograph of a young Sarah, her bright smile and sparkling eyes a testament to the vibrant woman she had once been. Elijah took the photo, his fingers tracing the outline of her face, a bittersweet smile tugging at his lips. "She was beautiful," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. Denise placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "She was more than that, Elijah. She was strong and brave, and she loved you more than anything in this world. She was so proud of you." Elijah nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat as he held the photo close to his heart. He knew Denise was right. His mother's strength and love had been his guiding light, a force that had carried him through the darkest of times. And now, without her, he felt adrift, lost in a world that suddenly felt too vast, too overwhelming. As the days passed, Elijah began to adjust to life without his mother. He returned to school, his teachers and classmates offering him quiet condolences and sympathetic smiles. But while their words were kind, they did little to ease the ache in his heart. He moved through his days in a daze, his mind constantly drifting back to memories of his mother, her voice a soft echo in the back of his mind. At night, he would lie awake, staring at the ceiling as he replayed their final moments together, her words a fragile thread connecting him to her even in death. "You're strong, Elijah, stronger than you know, and I know you're going to do amazing things." Her voice haunted him, both a comfort and a challenge, a reminder of the promise he had made to her, to live his life fully, to carry on her legacy with courage and determination. One evening, as he sat alone in the living room, his gaze fell on the folder of documents his mother had kept from the courthouse. Among the papers was a small envelope with his name scrawled across the front in his mother's familiar handwriting. With trembling hands, he opened it, unfolding a letter that she had written for him in her final days. "My dearest Elijah, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. I can only imagine how hard this must be for you. But I want you to know that I am so proud of the man you are becoming. You have been my light, my strength, and my greatest joy. You have a heart full of kindness and resilience, and I know that you are destined for great things. I want you to remember that you are never alone. There are people who care about you, who will support you just as you supported me. Denise, your teachers and friends, they are all part of the family you've built, and they will be there for you. Life will be hard, my love, but you are stronger than you think. Carry our memories with you, but don't let them hold you back. Live your life fully, chase your dreams, and know that I am watching over you, cheering you on from wherever I am. With all my love, Mom." Elijah clutched the letter to his chest, his tears flowing freely as he whispered a silent promise to his mother. He would honor her wishes. He would carry her strength with him, a beacon guiding him through the darkness. As the weeks turned into months, Elijah threw himself into his studies with a renewed determination. He poured his energy into his schoolwork, his love for math and science, a constant reminder of his mother's belief in his potential. He knew she had seen something in him, a spark of greatness that she had nurtured with love and patience, and now he was determined to prove her right. Denise continued to be a steadfast presence in his life, her quiet support a source of comfort as he navigated the challenges of his new reality. She helped him with chores, provided meals, and most importantly, reminded him that he was not alone. Through her, he found a sense of stability, a grounding force that allowed him to continue moving forward. One afternoon, Elijah received a letter from his school counselor, Miss Thompson, inviting him to apply for a scholarship program for students pursuing careers in science and technology. The scholarship was highly competitive, awarded to only a handful of students each year, but Miss Thompson believed in him, her faith in his abilities mirroring the pride his mother had shown. Elijah felt a surge of excitement, a spark of hope that reignited his determination. He knew that this was his chance, a chance to honor his mother's legacy, to build a future that would make her proud. He spent countless hours working on his application, crafting essays, gathering letters of recommendation, and pouring his heart into every word. He was fueled by his mother's memory, her love a constant reminder of his purpose. The months that followed were filled with anticipation, each passing day a step closer to his dream. And when the acceptance letter finally arrived, Elijah felt a rush of joy so overwhelming it brought him to tears. He had been awarded the scholarship, a full ride to a prestigious program in biomedical engineering, an opportunity to use his talents to help others, to make a difference in the world, just as his mother had always hoped. On the day of his high school graduation, Elijah stood on the stage, the weight of his mother's memory heavy in his heart as he accepted his diploma. As he looked out into the audience, he saw Denise smiling proudly, her eyes filled with tears of joy. He knew that his mother would have been there beside her, her heart swelling with pride for all that he had accomplished. Later that evening, as he sat alone in his room, Elijah took out the letter his mother had written, reading her words one last time before tucking it safely away. He knew he would carry her with him always, her love a constant presence that would guide him through every challenge, every triumph. Years passed, and Elijah's life unfolded in ways he could never have imagined. He went on to pursue his degree, driven by a passion for helping others, a desire to honor his mother's memory by dedicating his life to healing and innovation. His journey was not easy. There were moments of doubt, times when the weight of his grief threatened to pull him under. But each time, he would remember his mother's words, her unwavering belief in his strength, and he would find the courage to keep going. Eventually, Elijah became a biomedical engineer, his work focused on developing treatments for chronic illnesses, an endeavor inspired by the battle his mother had fought so bravely. His innovations saved lives, brought hope to countless families, and fulfilled the promise he had made to his mother all those years ago. As he looked back on his journey, he knew that every step, every sacrifice, had been worth it. His mother's love had been the foundation upon which he had built his life, her memory a guiding light that had carried him through even the darkest of times. And though she was gone, Elijah felt her presence with him always, a reminder that love, once given, never truly fades. It endures, a flame that burns brightly, illuminating the path forward, giving strength to those who carry it. In honoring his mother's legacy, Elijah had found his purpose, his strength, and ultimately, his peace. And as he looked toward the future, he knew that he would continue to carry her love with him, a testament to the bond they had shared, a bond that even death could not break.